if you read in the book of Matthew, where it talks about, Christ says, the earth shook and the rocks were rent. Right to the left of the cross hole, at the base, the rock was rent. And the centurion stuck his spear into Christ's spleen, and the blood and water came out. It went down through that onto the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant that God had arranged to be hidden in that chamber 600 years before Christ.
Under these conditions, the tiny living particles can plainly be seen against a dark background. In 1996, my family and I made a trip to Nashville to visit the Wyatts. I brought along the microscope, which at that time was somewhat portable in its early stage of development, and set it up in the basement of the Wyatts' house. One evening, Mary Nell Wyatt asked me to take a look at some material from a burial cave to see if these tiny particles were present. Without my knowledge, one of the samples was actually the blood sample that Ron had taken from the Ark of the Covenant dig. The sample was placed under the microscope, and as the specimen began to come into focus, thousands of tiny particles, somatives if you will, became plainly visible. At that time, Mary Nell, who was standing behind me, began to weep. As I turned around and saw the expression on her face, I realized immediately that the sample we were looking at was actually the sample that Ron had found to be the blood of Christ. Okay, Mary Nell's going to take the sample and mix it with sterile water. And a test tube there that we that'll be enough. Well, she's going to take some sterile water and a little bit, just some drops all we need there, man. Okay, so now that we've got the sample on the slide, we'll go ahead and focus into the sample and see what comes up on the screen here. And there they are, thousands of living particles, less than a quarter of a micron in size. Spores are maybe a half micron, and but most of those little particles you're looking at is 17,000 X, magnified on the screen 17,000 times. You know, in the Bible it tells us that the life is in the blood, and there's little living particles that most people are unaware that are there. Same thing we see in living blood. The scientist in Canada says that these things never die. The blood may dry up, but these things, he says, they're indestructible, and he says they are the basis of life.
The results we obtained in no way can be said to be proof that the specimen was the blood of Christ. But based on the location from which the specimen came, we believe it was what Ron believed it was. Years earlier, Ron had taken a blood specimen from the lid of the case which contained the Ark of the Covenant.
The blood of Christ is only dried out, folks. It's not dead. When we rehydrated it with normal saline, 72 hours of body temperature with slight, very gentle swirling, and put the white blood cells in a growth
very interesting, this blood sample they were able to take from the Shroud of Turin, from the Ark of the Covenant, which was underneath Golgotha. This is what Ron Wyatt found. This is one of his major discoveries, was finding this cavern underneath Golgotha where Christ died, where he was able to extract dry blood from it as well. And, of course, they were saying that he had 24 chromosomes. Now, I think you would actually say 23, but what they were trying to get at was the fact that he had one from Mary for each of the 22 autosomes. And then he had also one X chromosome from Mary and one Y chromosome from God the Father. Now, this XY would be considered 1, so it'd still be called 23, I think, if you wanted to look at it that way. It just depends on how you want to look at it. But I find this very interesting. I was doing a lot of research on this. Is there anybody that has any type of condition where they have one autosome and not have a pair, from one parent? And I actually can't find any. I was doing quite a bit of research on this. This is how we receive our chromosomes from our parents. You have your mother and your father contribute one of each to you for all the autosomes. And of course, the mother has an XX and the man has an XY, and depending on the father, which one he passes to you is whether or not the baby is a male or female. All right? So obviously, if the father passes a Y, you're a male. So with that being in mind, I was looking at several different syndromes and things of that nature. And here's an example of one that's very rare. Only 50 people, I think. Actually, I think it's 50 people in the world have this type of chromosome setup where there's a duplicate of two female ones in here, which of course is strange. But generally speaking, this type of person doesn't have many problems. Just a few. How does this prove that he is the perfect Lamb of God? Did he have perfect DNA? Did he have perfect chromosomes? Obviously, a regular chromosome setup looks like this. You have double pairs for all 22 of these, and then you have either two X's for a female or an X and a Y for a male. In the case of Jesus, you have here single for all the 22, and then you have one X for Mary and one Y miraculously from God the Father. All right, so what we have here, if you look at Romans 5:12, sin spreads from one man to all mankind. It directly comes from Adam. Okay? Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, so it all spread to all men from one man, Adam. Now, Adam, what is different between Adam and Eve? Adam had a Y chromosome. All right? Adam would have had the Y chromosome. So this is where you have one thing that is able to pass the sin onto all mankind. It doesn't say Eve passed it. Now, Eve is all X chromosome. Adam is the only one with a Y chromosome. So sin was passed by the Y chromosome. That's the only one that passes onto everyone else. So sin was passed only through this one chromosome. And this is the one chromosome that was added directly by God miraculously. So this would make him the perfect Lamb of God. Of course, also, there's other factors I'm going to point out here as well. You might ask yourself, what about the fact that Eve had corrupted X chromosome, right? Now, Mary. You might be saying to yourself, well, Mary also had a corrupted X chromosome. right? And also you could say that about Eve, I guess, as well, because Eve, well, I guess you would say X chromosome is in all females, and females derived from Adam, so, but they also have the corruption, right? You say that also with Mary, here, you see this. But here's actually the answer. 1 Corinthians 7:14, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean. So, if the husband is a believer and the wife is not, she's sanctified by him. So Mary was sanctified by the presence of a Y chromosome, of a pre-fall Adam. Now, pre-fall Adam would be a perfect chromosome being added in by God that was not from Adam's corruption. So it would be a pre-fall Adam Y chromosome. And this union in becoming one with corrupted Y, her X was sanctified or set apart. So this is how Jesus was also tempted as we are, because his Y chromosome was perfect, but that doesn't mean he wasn't human. He was still perfectly human, and he was also tempted in all ways as we were. And he was able to resist. Okay? So you see there that he also had the ability to make potentially a mistake, but he never did, because he always chose the right path, being God's son. Alright? Yet he was tempted in all ways as we were, so he understands where we come from. So he had his X chromosome, and these chromosomes sanctified by the Y chromosome. That was perfect. Alright? So this is how that was occurring. Of course, also you might say there was more to it than that. I don't know exactly how it all worked, but maybe there was also some miraculous factor to it that made these all perfect. I don't know.